you're going for that sort of drum sounds, a sort of like the cannons. You want everything to sound like a cannon.
Okay, Andy, so we're going to talk about King Crimson, the Bruford years. So what does Bill Bruford mean to you as a drummer?
Like I said in the early video that we just talking about what got me into prog, it was the Yes album, and it was Bruford. And I think I at that time I was listening to a lot of rock drummers, so I was into Cozy Powell, John Bonham, Bill Ward, all those, Brian Downey, and you're going for that sort of drum sounds, a sort of like the cannons. You want everything to sound like a cannon, So and then I heard Bruford, and I can remember thinking, oh my God, you could have a different sound on the drums. You could check. And I can remember going in and I tuned my snare drum up high and went, oh my God, that's brilliant. I could and that was his style was so signature, and Kerrang ran the 10 greatest rock drummers of all time. They did probably about 1982. They had this little article, and they had Bonham in and Ginger Baker, and they had a thing on Bruford, and they were saying, just check out this guy's left hand, and and they said, get the first album, the very first album, Guess. And I went and bought that as well, which not a lot of people listen to that much. I don't think it's one of the favourite Yes albums, but Bruford's drumming on that is absolutely incredible. So I was a big fan of Bill Bruford, and I'd read about this, when you sort of get the encyclopedia of rock and going through it, and I'd read he was in King Crimson. So the first Crimson album I bought was Lark's Tongues in Aspic. I didn't listen to, In the Courts of the Crimson King. I didn't even know that was there. The first one I bought was Lark's Tongues in Aspic, and I'd got into the Bavish Orchestra at the same time, around about the same time. And it was the only other album I've ever heard that had that.
Yeah,
sound.
Similar. Yeah, there's a definitely. What we were just talking earlier about, there's a magic to some bands where there's something between the players, like with the 5-piece Mahavishnu or the four or 5-piece King Crimson with Jamie Muir. There's something there that's outside of the individual. I can't remember what Fripp refers to it, but there's a thing that there's a magic to certain bands, and and bands don't have it for long. Often they'll have it for a while and it'll disappear again. But like Sabbath had it, and Zeppelin, and the Mahavishnu and King Crimson. There's something to those bands that's more than three. The people playing together. There's something greater, isn't there? Some amazing magical chemistry. And Crimson.
You mentioned Sabbath, because when I got Lark's Tongues in Aspic, I thought this is like a prog Sabbath.
Yeah, exactly.
Black Sabbath. I absolutely love Black Sabbath.
Oh,
I think the Mahavishnu Orchestra, King Crimson, and Black Sabbath. They're all, in my mind, they're all related.
Same page, isn't it? There's there's a thing with and Bill Ward, phenomenal drummer, and he's just such a for feel, and the tight but loose thing, and the the massive gaps and speeding up and slowing down, but doing it perfectly. It's just
he's something else. Right, listen to this. Right, what's this?
Yeah.
Who has done that on the drums? I'm just tapping a hi-hat, tapping a hi-hat, and you're going, oh, I know that song.
Yeah, and there's that footage of them, like Sabbath live, early 70s, and there's they're playing together. There's a magic to it, and the same thing with Crimson, where there was something bigger going on than these.
Yeah, without a doubt. Blokes, dark and menacing as well. Something bigger and darker and more menacing when they got together.
So Lark's Tongue. So you got Jamie Muir on percussion on this one as well, haven't you? So you got he's got those sort of rattling chains and stuff, hasn't he? Sort of, that sort of, which is quite interesting alongside Bruford as well. So yeah, I mean, Lark's Tongue is one of my favourite Crimson albums. Incredibly intense record, isn't it? I mean,
it is. And I thought before we move on, I think I'd like to mention the fact that once I'd got those albums, I then went and bought the early King Crimson albums, all of them, all in one go, because I thought this is the best band ever. And I was so disappointed by them. I'm probably sacrilegious. I loved Schizoid Man on the first album.
Me too,
the first album, I loved In the Court of the Crimson King. But Wake of Poseidon and Lizard and Islands, they're good albums, but I was so let down, expecting down. So I think I sold them. I so disgusted that I sold all these.
I like the early stuff, but for me, the stuff that really excites me is when when Bruford joins and John Wetton, and there's that as a bass and rhythm section wise, they're just phenomenal. I love Wetton's bass sound. I love the whole the powerhouse improvisation, with the violin and the guitar going over the top. I mean, just so exciting. I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like to see that band in the mid 70s.
Yeah,
it must have been like. Because like I said, I do like the earlier Crimson stuff. It's all right. It's great by anyone's standards.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant stuff. It's just because it just so wasn't what I was expecting, and was so not. I mean, this band with Lark's Tongues completely changes the remix, don't they? They completely change.
It was great.
I think that Fripp knew that the writing was on the wall for prog in 1972, 73.
Yeah.
I think he'd already worked it out. And I think he is going somewhere else with Lark's Tongues. As we go through these first three albums, each one is its own world as well. They're not the same. And Lark's Tongues was interesting for me because of the strangeness of the compositions, that each composition is its own thing. Whereas with Red, a lot of the compositions are quite similar in tone. There's a similar thread going through, but with Lark's, because I remember it starts off and it sounds like somebody's playing a bicycle. It's like they've got bicycles in there, and someone's twanging a tire, and someone's got a little car, one of the little horns.
There's an African piano thing, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, to me, I thought this is someone's playing they're playing bicycles, yeah. But the thing, I've never heard an album mixed like this. It seems to go louder than an album can go. It's so quiet. And then when it surges in, it seems to go a bit louder than your stereo normally would go, So that first track on there is
so quiet, isn't it? It comes in.
Yeah, and then when the riffs kick in, and Fripp's guitar kicks in, it's just the heaviest thing on the planet, and then from there you go to Book of Saturday, which is this absolutely beautiful, delicate,
melody thing,
and Easy Money is almost like a sort of slow funk. You got Exiles, and then right at the end is like Thomas and Aspic Part 2. It's just.
I mean, I think one of the things with this run of albums is there's kind of a similar structure to them, isn't there? In that, they're bringing in the first track is the big monster riff one, isn't it? And then it's sort of, and then finishes on the big tracks again. So Lark's Tongues is wonderful. So we'll move on to Starless and Bible Black then, which I absolutely love. I mean, I am going to say I am just going to say that I love.
You love every amp, yeah. You love every single album, yeah.
I mean, The Great Deceiver. That's so Mahavishnu, isn't it?
Yeah, that. But the thing is that when I was a kid, I got the Mahavishnu. I had to study, but I got it, and I worked out that, that's in 1916. That one's in 28, right? But what Bruford and John Wetton do on that Great Deceiver, and I don't know what it is to this day, because they bring a riff in, boom, 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 and then when Bruford comes in, what tempo is this? How can it be working with the bass line,
Thinking about it, I don't know if
bizarre stuff.
Was it recorded live, The Great Deceiver? Because a lot of that stuff was recorded in the studio in live, and then they took the audience track off. So I don't know if it was done by a nod and a wink, you know what I mean? A sort of they were so on the ball playing together, they were sort of visually signaling each other as well. So I don't really know. But
that's the big difference. There's these big differences. The big difference between Lark's Tongues and Starless is Starless then has got all this live jamming thing going on, which I haven't got it, and I don't know if you've got it. There's a box set called Great Deceiver.
Yeah, I had it years ago, and I had it on a long-term loan from somebody. And yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? It's there's well, it's not. I mean, it's one of those ones where it's sort of a lot of jamming, so it's not all great, it's not all amazing. Yeah. But when they're on it, it's absolutely brilliant. And when they're, I think they must have been a very difficult band to be in, because it sounds like, I mean, I've listened to quite a few sort of, the King Crimson collection and the bootlegs, the EGM of Mission. It sounds like when they were on it, they're pretty much the best band out there. But they weren't always on it. There wasn't all that standard. I think it must have been very tiring to, the bass and the drums were so dominant. So Wetton's bass was so loud. It must have been so hard as a violinist to play over it. Certainly David Cross must have struggled to pitch himself. And it must have been hard for Robert Fripp as well to play over that stuff. Just because it was so powerful that the bass sound was just, I mean, it's one of my, John Wetton's bass sound in the 70s stuff is just one of my favourite bass sounds ever. It's the monumental prog bass sound, it really is. And you got Chris Squire, John Wetton and Geddy Lee. And Geddy Lee's sound really sounds like Chris Squire. I love Chris Squire and Geddy Lee's sound. And then if you want to go that times 10, then go to King Crimson, John Wetton. So that's the big difference between that, is because there's all this improvisation and the way it's integrated in. So the way I'd put it is, you could tell there's a big influence from the Miles Davis electric band, which is Brew, and Live Evil, when they've gone and jammed, and it really does sound like Live Evil. Yeah, Live Evil. I'm going to put that in there as well. So Sabbath, Mahavishnu, King Crimson, and Live Evil by Miles. This is going in my dark, menacing, And I love all that stuff, That's
and the other thing I'd love to mention about, I can't remember the track title. The last track on side
Fracture.
one.
Oh, the Mincer.
And it's got no drums on, has it? Just, and Bruford's got a credit.
Yeah.
Because he didn't play.
Contributed silence.
Yeah, he contributed silence.
But that's really cool, isn't it? As a drummer.
That's why I mentioned it. Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah,
that's mature playing, that, isn't it?
Yeah, and Fripp being able to acknowledge that, the drummer not playing, the fact that the whole of that jam didn't choose to play, means you get a composition credit. When I've discussed copyright and stuff, and you get in trying to explain how bizarre it is to music students, I often use that track as an example, of what does contribute, compositional credit. Well, King Crimson's case, absolutely nothing.
But that is it is a legitimate compositional choice. It's not played, but so the big one for me, I mean, Fracture is the one. Because have you ever tried to play it?
No,
it's insane. I mean, Fracture is one of those ones that a little, and it's like there's a certain cross-picking technique that Fripp was developing, and you can hear it go, that technique.
I couldn't play that, not in a million years.
No, I mean,
I know exactly the thing you mean, and it's like
it's hard.
It's just mine. It's one of the hardest guitar things. It really is, yeah.
And it does. There's certain the way it moves around. It's almost like he's made it as awkward as possible to play. Yeah. It was almost a deliberate sort of. And there's sort of certain tonal things. I was talking to Sid Smith basically. There's certain tonal things that Fripp does where it's he's choosing. There's a certain tonal palette. He tends to the whole tone scale, and there's very specific things he does and kind of repeats the ideas. And which he's got his own sonic world, which I love about certain artists. That he's got his own sort of way of doing things. But Fracture is just so hard to play.
So and it's that's what I'm saying. That these three studio albums from this period of King Crimson, you can't buy one. You won't get what the rest are. It's not like buying an AC/DC album. You've got to get all three. And that big epic on side two. Yeah, that's something else.
I listened to these records too much when I was my teens. These ones and the Mahavishnu Orchestra records were my obsession when I was, and I was also into the Iron Maiden and stuff as well. But these were, those records were just so big for me, and it's It's like the Beatles stuff. I don't need to listen to it again because I can play it back in my head all the time because I listen to it so much. But oh man, it's so good. Right.
Yeah,
so
I'm exactly the same. They're just, what about USA, the live album?
I love USA. I think USA is fantastic because it's really intense, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's got, and I think before you could, later on you could get all the box sets and all that stuff, but it also, you heard some of those live improvisations as well on USA. So, because I always sort of forget it, there's a 3 studio albums in USA, but I really liked USA. I'm always a bit, live albums from that period for most bands, I'm always a little bit let down by the the production, It
sounds incredibly aggressive though, doesn't it? And there's the there's a version of Starless on the bonus track of the CD version, and it's one of my favourite bits of music ever because when the melody comes back in, Bruford just doing that on a like splash cymbal. He's really, really going for it, and then the melody comes back in, and it's after that big jam section in the middle, and it's just the most beautiful, simple melody. Oh man, it's just that's as good as that's for me. That's where post rock and Mogwai and a lot of soundtracky stuff comes from. There's so much that. Anyway, let's talk about Starless let's look at Red. So Red, this was the first King Crimson album I bought. So this is where I got into Crimson, and I absolutely loved it. So I thought Red was like. I mean, I was early '90s. So I was into grunge and the Melvins and Nirvana and stuff like that. So Red, hearing Red was just like, this totally makes sense. This is like Nirvana on the whole tone scale. This is brilliant.
Because Kurt Cobain loved it as well, didn't he? He loved Red, and you can help. I think that's the special ingredient in Nirvana is it's got a big chunk of King Crimson Red in there, and to me that of the 3 albums, that's like the perfect album. That album is they really know what they're doing on there. They've really condensed this sound down, and the final track, which is called Starless, isn't it? It's getting confused because it's the 70s where they got the wrong track on the wrong album. But,
it was
that's my favourite Crimson.
Starless track. Is my favourite Crimson track as well. And I saw them when they played live few years ago, and they played Starless, and it's still, if I think I could have written if any song says what's all that's good about progressive rock, Starless is it, because it moves through different sections. The lyrics are really good, the songwriting's really good, the musicianship is virtuoso without just whittling around. It's all going somewhere. It's all composed. It's all, every section works properly because they've worked out how to do it. There's a melodic structures. It's got the it's structured like a jazz standard, really. I mean, when the melody comes back in at the end. It's in terms of rock music for me, it's very much the pinnacle of sort of 70s progressive rock, really. That's that song.
Well, to put into some context, I played Drumfest in 2005 with I was on the bill with Terry Bozzio and Thomas Lang and Kenny Aronoff, Greg Bisonet, and it was a stress because playing on the bill with those guys. Of course. And in the audience coming to watch it was Bill Bruford.
Oh, wow.
So Bill Bruford goes backstage, and I got a mate called Big John Briscoe, who's about 6'8", and he's a huge King Crimson fan. He's now the guitarist with Don Powell from Slade, believe it or not. So, and so he's got on his back a huge tattoo of the sun of Starless and the Bottle of Black. So I go, John, come and show Bill Bruford your tattoo. So I dragged this 6'8", rocker over to see Bill, and you can see he's a bit like,
oh, here we go.
I go, take your shirt off, and he goes, oh, no, I don't want to. Go on, who wants to see a tattoo? So we have this bizarre thing going on. But he broke the ice. So I started to chat with Bill, and then I had to do a signing session a couple of days later with him, and we met up. So it was one of those things. I got to meet him again. So, do you remember me? Yeah. And so I asked him. I said, can you tell me about the sessions for Red? What the hell's that symbol?
Yeah,
because there's that funny symbol on there, isn't there?
Yeah.
And he said he turned up to the session, And there'd been a band in the studio beforehand, and he said they'd been playing this crash cymbal and they caned it. And he said it had actually, part of the cymbal had actually flopped over, so it looked like a sombrero. And he said they stuck it in the bin of the studio, and he sets up, this is completely unplanned, they're going about to do the album, and he goes, well, what's this? So he pulls it out and sticks it on. And that cymbal for me, in terms of the drums, it defines that album, you know.
It's on One More Red Nightmare, is it? It's down, and
so,
it's most sort of...
I started stacking cymbals. I started, you know, this is the thing about Bruford. He really opened my eyes to, like, you can have whatever drum sound you want. And I stack cymbals, and then Terry Bozier later started stacking cymbals. Now everybody does this; they've all got these trash cymbals and stuff, you know. But I was doing that really early on. You know, I would pick big hunks of metal and stick them on as cymbals, you know, and all because Bruford did it on Red, you know. And another thing I'd like to say about it, about King Crimson. You always feel that Robert Fitz slightly got special powers. Do you know what I mean? He's got like foresight, or he can transmit himself across continents and stuff like this. I've always got a feel he's like that.
There's definitely magical thing. Well, I was talking to a few of my mates about this, and you know, Carvis and Sid, and a few of my mates. We had this conversation about magical sort of thinking, and like thinking of things not just about, you know, showing off your chops, but showing off, trying to achieve some sort of psychedelic brain melt with the music you create. And I think there's definitely an element of that with King Crimson. There's definitely a sort of a magical, you know, mystical side to it, isn't there? This quite weird.
Well, I feel it like, you know, if you feel like he knows he's going to make 3 albums, and you know that he knows that Starless is going to be the last track on Red, and Starless, he seems to go, well, everything that King Crimson do then is in that one track, all laid out logically, you know. When he disappeared, and he went off in 74 to a retreat, J.G. Bennett, right? See, when I was getting into King Crimson, I'd picked up some, completely unrelated, I'd picked up some books by Colin Wilson, and I
I've read your cult and that. Yeah, he's great. Yeah,
I really got into the teachings of Gurdjieff, and back then, not anymore, but back then I wanted to be a fully fledged Gurdjieffian. I wanted to do the work. I was, you know, back in my 20s, you know. So if up here, I mean, I'll we can do this with modern technology. If you look here, that there, can you see that there?
All the Gurdjieff stuff, yeah.
That's all my Gurdjieff books. So I'm not into it so much now, but
I think I like the magical thinking stuff. Though. I like the idea of. I've read a few bits, and I've read the Colin Wilson stuff. And I like the idea of magical thinking, but I think so much of that is about focusing your mind on specific things, and whether it's because of magical thinking or it's because of a outside, or it's just that you focused your mind on that specific thing. There is a logic, and I think it does work because focusing your energies into you know, achieving something does manifest certain things. So there's a logic to it, isn't there? Whether that's just writing a list and making stuff happen. But the Gurdjieff things is I mean, that's digging ditches, isn't it? That's a you know, that's an intense world.
I was really super interested in it. This is something that has just struck me, and I can't believe I've never thought it before. I've thought it independently about the Mavish Juncture and about King Crimson. Really bizarre music that sold a lot, because those guys weren't trying to sell a lot of records. You really feel like they were spiritually trying to change the audience. And the funny thing is that John McLaughlin's with the Mavish was trying to do it in a sort of white. I see white, and King Crimson's trying to do it.
Street Criminal versus J.G. Bennett.
Yeah, that's basically it. And I was into both of those things. So I think you can't do this talk without discussing this.
No, yeah, because it's a legitimate thing. I mean, and I think most of my mates who have played in bands, like bands that have achieved some, you know, there's some sort of when they take off, where the old hairs in the back of the neck goes up, and there's something happens. You know what I mean? And when that sort of thing happens, we've all spoken about something that's it's hard to say because you don't want to sound like, but you know, Carver said the same thing. Sid said the same. You know, there's something there, and we always talk about in the Fierce and the Dead stuff as well, where there's always something that's more beyond four blokes playing in a room. There's something else going on, and I think it's would be wrong not to mention that, wouldn't it?
I mean, at my age 53, I've ended up quite a hard materialist, but I'm very open-minded, and I try and keep my mind open. Anything's possible in the world, and there's all this sort of stuff. But I must. This is the thing I always say about music. I discovered philosophy and theosophy. I discovered like psychology. All the things I got interested come from the bands I was into, and really directly. So
same.
When I was reading up, you're trying to find out about what Crimson did with the albums, and then for me to discover that he'd gone into J.G. Bennett, and I knew all about it because I was into all this. And moving on to the next honorary King Crimson album, which is Robert Fripp's Discipline, which for me is in the same. I know Bruford's not on it, but I must give it a mention.
Exposure. Sorry.
Exposure, yes.
Yeah,
sorry.
Exposure is the link between 70s Crimson and 80s Crimson, isn't it? It's the missing. Yeah. It's because there's the what's the other one called? League of Gentlemen.
Yeah, that's got the link. Yeah.
So that's good, and they're both kind of what the cleverest Fripp did was realise punk was coming. Realised
he knows it. 74. He knows it when he gets out. He knows it. He knows it. It's his special Fripp, the special Fripp powers, which I am.
But I don't know how to represent it. But what a clever dude saying, right, well, this is done now. This is finished. It's time to go off and do something else. I'm going to go off and hang out, do the JD Bennett thing, and then I'll come back and do Heroes with Bowie and the stuff with Peter Gabriel and that, and then he'll go off and does Exposure and League of Gentlemen. Then and it's quite interesting. A lot of the people in this, they're all doing interesting work, weren't they? All these sort of, Bruford was off doing the Bruford album with Alan Holdsworth in the UK, wasn't he? So, and Fripp was doing Exposure, which I think Exposure's got. It's definitely got stuff that sounds like it could have been on Red, like Breathless sounds like it could have been on Red.
Yeah.
I love Breathless, such a great record. But and then he was moving towards that Discipline sound. I think. Can you imagine the shock it must have been for people in 1981 hearing Discipline for the first time?
Yeah.
It's like, where's the Mellotron?
I got into Crimson in 1983, 1984. And so the next thing was to then get which were being covered in the media quite a bit. There was actually a programme on BBC Two on Robert Fripp at that time.
Wow!
And they had footage of him doing the stuff with Andy Summers. And this I can remember sort of sit there. I'm into King Crimson. I'm into my Gurdjieff. I'm into all this weird stuff. It was like an afternoon, and this programme came up, and it was like People of Dorset. It was called something like that. It was like
it's on YouTube.
They were going to be looking at, the Dorset character we're going to be looking at today is Robert Fripp.
That's amazing.
And all this documentary had all footage of him drinking tea with his mom in whichever little village he comes from. Is it not Sherborne? That's the house that he went to.
He seems like a nice dude, doesn't he? He seems like a really nice guy.
And on this, he was promoting Three of a Perfect Pair. So, and this is the thing about the Fripp thing is he does those three albums with the John Wetton lineup with Bruford. And then he comes and does these three other albums in the 80s, and they seem to be the same as well. Yeah. They do the same
sequence of three records.
Yeah.
He's sort of done the research and development of the solo stuff, hasn't he? He sort of worked out these new things, like the picking patterns, and then there's the guitar synth. You can hear that coming in, and then there's the Frippatronics, and there's all that stuff. And then he spotted Baloo with Talking Heads. In that video, and then he's sort of gone, right, bring, and he's kind of worked out all the elements to it. So so many rock bands, people get together and they haven't got an idea, whereas Fripp will come up with the idea and then form the band around the idea, which is quite different. McLaughlin does the same thing with Mavic. Yeah. He's got this idea for this spiritual band where you're going to take different elements and cross, and I think a lot of people start bands without having an idea in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I mean, this is something that a lesson to be learned, isn't it? Because how many of us form bands like that? Where there's a definite concept, a definite idea where you're going to go, how many albums are going to do, what's going to be on those albums, and
I love it.
When you get into Gurdjieff, he talks about Beelzebub, and Beelzebub is not the devil; it's a different character, and I think King Crimson's like the Beelzebub character for Fripp. So a lot of the stuff he does outside King Crimson is actually very ethereal, beautiful. Except for Exposure. I can never remember the name of that album.
That wasn't available for a long time.
Yeah, but I think with King Crimson, he's doing a specific thing, almost like King Crimson's a character that he's inhabiting. That's what I've always felt.
It's something that
it's dealing with a darker,
a weirder sort of. I mean, he's playing in Crimson's always very different. Andy, am I losing you with the internet going? There we go.
Am I still there? Okay.
We had a bit of a lag at this end.
Healthy signal. I thought you indeed thought. You just froze, and I thought, I don't want to say anything because he's gone.
No, the internet froze. It's all right. Okay. Oh, we're back again now, yeah.
But yeah, so with Red, it feels for me the same. It follows the same pattern as Larks in that you've got these sort of 6. It is 6 exactly like Larks, Tongues, and That's because it is 6 completely different tracks that all do their own thing. That's what I feel. And then with Beat, you get a lot more of the jazz improvisation coming in and a lot of that sort of stuff. And then with Three of a Perfect Pair, he makes the perfect album, which starts and ends and has the big epic at the end, and then it actually ends with it's basically Larks, Tongues, and That's right at the end. It's these little things. I don't know if anyone else has noticed of the weird pattern. It's like here we are, and there's the the last track off the first album.
What remarkable vision though that Robert had though. I mean, remarkable just to have that vision to say, and also he's very good at ending things before they go rubbish.
Exactly.
That's one of the problems most bands have is they don't know when to stop.
Yeah.
And you're better off stopping and having even people with amazing memories because then you can come back rather than just knocking out, and doing the same thing over and over again. So why do you think Bruford was brought back in for that? Why was Bruford the essential drummer for that version of Crimson, do you think, the disciplined version of Crimson?
Well, my rock knowledge, I think what happened was they formed a band called Discipline with Bruford. And then the record company goes, well, if you've got Bruford in it, why don't you call it King Crimson? And I think, why would Robert Fripp do that? Why would he go for that more commercial route? It's possibly because he realised that what they were doing, I bet you when they first got in the studio, he didn't know what they were doing at that point. But once he heard what they were doing, he went, right, this is King Crimson. And I believe that King Crimson's a project and that it does certain things. And I think with Bruford, there seems to be these 3 albums. You get when we get to the Thrack period, it's a little bit messier, but it's a certain period of time he does with Bruford. He does these 3 things. And I think the album Three of a Perfect Pair, that's a really good title that sums up what's going on. I think there must be something, again, magical going on between him and Bruford, particularly for him to have brought him back. And I think Tony Levin brings in that sort of Brian Eno, Peter Gabriel world that he sort of explored earlier. And then Adrian Belew brings in a funny way, the new wave, if you know what I mean, even though I know him from Zappa's band, which is very probably, but his voice and
Talking Heads. He's got Talking Heads thing going, yeah. I mean, he's a remarkable guitarist as well. I love Adrian Belew's guitar playing.
The twin guitar attack in that band is I mean, King Crimson have never done that before. It's this new thing, isn't it? And it's also coming from Tony Levin because he's playing Chapman stick. You've got treble end strings there as well. So they're 3 really incredible albums. People don't seem to like Beat so much,
Oh, I love.
You know, when I see, I love all three of them exactly the same. I think they're all brilliant, and the commercial stuff that is on Three the Perfect Pair on side one, where they've obviously really gone more commercial, does not sound like a sellout because it's perfectly balanced by perhaps the most insane side.
The stuff on side two, Neil and Jack and Me, I think that's a fantastic record. I mean, I wish I'd written a song as good. Two Hands is really, really good. I mean, the beat's got some really good stuff on it. I mean, my favourite version, once again, of this, I mean, I think, is the what do they call? What's the live album called? Absent Lovers. The the live album for this lineup. I love that record.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I'm afraid. No,
really, really good. Really, I mean, it's very much. I think they do Red on it as well. So it kind of goes back to some of but mostly it's just all the new stuff. I mean, I couldn't believe it when Fripp started to do all the old songs again. I mean, I never expected him to do that because it was all about moving forward for years, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's how many musicians? Miles did it right towards the end. John McLaughlin's just done it. Fripp's done it. So these are people that are in control of their careers. They know, what they're doing. What about the Thrack era?
I love Thrack. Well, Thrack was the second King Crimson album I bought. So, and I bought it when it came out because I was 19, 20 when that came out. Yeah, and I love Thrack. I think it's fantastic. It's another one that's it's got a brilliant combination of the 70s stuff and the 80s stuff, but with a sort of weird Beatley thing going as well. With
there's a Beatley thing going, and not more than one Beatley thing going. By this time, I'm such a nutter that I'm waiting for Vroom to come out. For me, it was Vroom. I bought Vroom, which is like the EP. But thing, Vroom is like a proper album. It's momentous. I thought Vroom was like, this is like, we've got this new band, and it's expanded from the guitar duo thing. Has now expanded to almost like the band's a duo. We've got two separate bands. And they sort of, sometimes they just march off in different directions. It's a completely incredible concept. And when you listen to Vroom, it sounds like the Thrack band, but just in a room playing. And I absolutely love that EP. I mean, it's about 30, 35 minutes long, so it's...
Yeah, I've got it somewhere. I haven't heard it. I mean, I didn't buy it at the time.
No.
It was one of the things I found later on. But I absolutely, I love the thing of... Bruford and Mastroianni playing off each other. I think that's so. I mean, they're both fantastic players, aren't they? So, but it was such a brave. I mean, when a lot of other bands from that era were knocking out really safe stuff, Thrack wasn't that at all, was it? It was so.
No.
Bonkers.
Yeah, and it's like I thought there's some real Beatles melodies because, of course, but there was also a big influence. From Day in the Life, which is almost like Charles Ives, where you feel like there's these two bands walking through each other, and
Charles Ives. So you wanted to get the sound of two marching bands going in opposite directions, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I feel like they do that, and then after that they follow that up with Thrack Attack, which these three I absolutely love. Thrack Attack again was just the icing on the cake, just full on. Darkness, and once Bruford goes, I lose track of King Crimson at that point. So I
still, stayed in with it, but I think there was a certain magic between there's a certain thing between Robert Fripp and Bill Bruford playing together that's it's just one of those relationships, isn't it? Where I think they probably, reading. Have you read Bill Bruford's book?
No, I haven't at all.
So I really
want to read it. Yeah.
No, it's really good. And he sort of talks about it's his ideal home and a bed of nails all at once. So he said he loved being in the band, but he found it so frustrating and so difficult to do. So it was one of those.
And why do you think that was? What do you glean from the book? What is it?
Yeah, well, it's always going to be. Although Robert says it's not his band. There's the element that it is his band, so there's always going to be, and there's a lot of arguments, and I suppose any band that's got that level of players is going to have, that sort of tension. But And it's so lovely to go and see. I mean, I went to see the current King Crimson lineup, and they all seem just really happy, and they don't have that tension that that the 70s and 80s Crimson had. But it's a lovely thing to see, because it's just nice to see Robert Fripp and the guys happy, because they made all this wonderful music, and it never seemed like a very fun band to be in, to be honest. Because it was always.
Who'd have thought after all this that Robert Fripp would become a YouTube sensation with his wife?
Amazing.
I mean, you couldn't write this down, could you? And so my life, this has been a big part of my life.
Me too, yeah.
Going from this impenetrable genius, sat there with this one spotlight on his head, sat on a stool, with his Gurdjieffian cogs moving around. Yeah. He's probably got stuff floating in the dressing room, and all that bit. To go from that to seeing him, so my kids are coming in again, to seeing that happen.
To doing 5-star with the mohawk.
Doing 5-star to Victoria.
I love seeing him happy. It's just nice to see the guy happy, and he seems to be so happy, and it's lovely to see. So,
I think he's done it right, and I think that there is a spiritual thing to King Crimson, and I think it's a cathartic thing. I think that the darkness is there for a reason, and I think I really do feel that about that. But I feel about the Mavish Noctua as well, and I think I think there's a concept that he achieved, and I think
what a life's work.
Yeah, basically, yeah. What do you think of his actual guitar playing, Matt? Just before we finish up, as a guitarist,
I think he's a wonderful player. Yeah, I mean, he was a big inspiration to me when I was a kid, fairly obviously. There's a lot of vocabulary there. I love that he's got a very specific vocabulary. And he recontextualizes his playing by collaborating with others, but often you can hear stuff in his playing that there's it just happens to be where that concept's working, because you can hear him on he's so distinctive as a player. Right from the what's the Giles and Fripp record, there's a song called Something Eyes on there. And he's playing that flat picking style that he'd be playing on frame by frame, like in the 80s, in the 60s. So, I think he's brilliant. I mean, just, yeah.
I thought I'd bring this up, I know, as we draw to an end, but because there's another thing I'd like to mention about King Crimson. There's a Brian Eno album called Nerve Net, and I bought Nerve Net, and I stuck it on the car, and I was driving along on it, and I think there's a track called Distributed Being. And this is a really ambient, trippy, like really delicate drum beat, like, and he goes like this for about 5 or 6 minutes, and he's really hypnotic. And then suddenly Fripp tears in with his guitar solo that can only be described as the only thing that's near it is Alan Holdsworth. It's the most vicious, fast, brutal, all over the neck, sounds like 20 fingers. And I was driving along, and it shocked me so much in the car back when I bought it about 92. I had to pull the car over. It shook me up because I wasn't expecting it. The most, I mean, when it comes on, you think, what the hell's this? And Fripp's changing the guitar tone. And I suddenly became aware of that Fripp can burn like no other guitarist has ever been. He's like a Holdsworth or a McGoughlin.
But he doesn't play like that.
And you don't hear it so much. You don't hear it.
It's interesting, actually. The best those three players who I think are the three key guitarists of the 70s and going forward, those three guitarists, often the best playing isn't on their own records. So McGoughlin doesn't do that many solos with Mahavishnu, really. It's more about the focus on the ensemble playing, and Fripp's best playing is quite often on other people's records, Heroes, or
there we go,
records, or and Holdsworth. Some of his best lead playing, I think, is the Bruford album and the Lifetime stuff. Tony Williams, stock and that. The Tony Williams Lifetime album he plays on, the lead playing on that is just phenomenal. And I don't know if it's because on their own projects they're so sort of, they can't just let rip. But all three of those, they're some of their best players on other people's records. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that's the interesting thing. If you go to King Crimson, to hear this guitar genius, some of the rhythm parts they're really difficult, like you said. But lead wise, I can't think of a guitar solo on any of this stuff that you go.
The live album's got solos on, but mostly the it's not, the records aren't about that. I don't think. Yeah. And the same thing with the Mahavishnu. That it's not about the widdly playing. I don't really care about that. What I care about is that feeling of the jet taking off as it goes.
Without a doubt.
Sequence goes, ascends. That's what I'm excited about. I'm not excited about someone's hands moving. I'm excited about that feeling of the hairs on the back of your neck going, because those chords are just doing something magical. And I think all three of those artists achieve that. And I say that Bill Bruford solo albums got very much the same sort of feel, haven't they? We mentioned
I think that we've talked at length about this, and the conclusion I've come to is one I've come to before, is that the truly great artists create their own world. Yeah, man. And you enter into that world, and if you like it, you have to accept the world. And I think King Crimson, has its own world that you enter into. I think Frank Zappa does it. I think the Mahavishnu Orchestra do it, and it's almost like tangible. You can, so even at their new wave phase on Three of a Perfect Fair, and even at their Beatles psychedelic phase on Thrack, and then the Dark Black Sabbath phase, all of this is tied together by this concept, this King Crimson concept, and I think that's something to take away.
And I think there's a David Bowie, there's Miles Davis, there's people like that who have a vision, and it goes through different sounds, but the vision is the same, isn't it? The vision, yeah. And they can step outside. If Fripp can do a solo album and it's not there, he can I love his guitar playing on some of the Sylvan stuff. I love him on some of the Bowie stuff, and it's Fripp. But it's not King Crimson. King Crimson's its own world. So, and I think we haven't had a bad word to say about it. There's no album that we said, I'm not so keen on that. I think every single one we said is absolute classic, which is something else, isn't it? It's very rare you get what a run of record. You know what I mean? Flying, there's not many people do that, is there? But look at you and me. We love the Mahavishnu Orchestra, don't we? Absolutely love them. What do you think about Inner Worlds? It's all right. It's not. It's all right. Yeah, and it's a good album, and I listen. For anyone else, it'd be brilliant. But you expect? I was expecting. But King Crimson, that's the thing that I've really come out. I thought I've done quite a few of these rankings, and you go, I quite like that. Not so keen. You and me have gone through every single album. Yeah, great. So we've covered 9 albums and said, they're all absolutely amazing. But they're amazing because there's 3 ones in one style, 3 another, and 3 another. So there's a. It wasn't like they were trying to do the same thing, but they had the same vision. They're trying to do different things musically, but there was, there's a different way of doing it, isn't there? There's this. I think that's the thing. Musicians what I get excited about is, like you say, their own world, their own vision, their own way of doing things. I think Cardiacs or Voivod, and there's XTC. There's other bands that have got their own little world, and you can choose to go into it or not, but they've got their own thing. You know what I mean? I love all that. So, but right. Thanks so much, Andy. Go and listen to King Crimson. I will. I'm going to go and listen to 3 of a Perfect Pair, side 2. I'm going with the heavy stuff. I want to hear about a car rusting out, a whole side about a car rusting in a junkyard. That's what we need right now. Andy, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing. I'm going to stop recording now. Thanks so much. Right, let's put it off.